Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Attract Health, Build Wealth podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through codependency, allowing ourselves to attract health, build wealth, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us. And because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible, yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. And today in episode 8, I wanted to touch on a critical theory and thought that I had about my development into my true magnificent self. And that is my past and how it has shaped and defined me, and also learning how to live a healthy and wealthy life with so much pain in my past. But before we get into the discussion, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode, any feedback you have, or anything you'd like for me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. And remember, you can share anonymously. It's a safe place, and I would welcome the discussion. My thoughts and my reasoning for talking about this topic was based off some inner dialogue that I have been having with myself. I'm learning some very disturbing things about my past because now I am open to them, when for the entirety of my life, I have boxed them up and thrown them away, and not even being able to access memories of my childhood. I've been shaped by my environment, and I know I'm not alone. My thoughts were shaped. My feelings were shaped. My emotions, my actions, my intentions, my goals. Almost every aspect of who I am was shaped by my interaction with others. And the formative years in my childhood and my family of origin was where I learned most things about safety, emotions, boundaries, thoughts. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not uniquely me, and please don't take this as a rant or as a platform for blaming, but it has been studied extensively that our early environment, the one that we were born into, shapes a great deal of our lives. In fact, one of the big triggers for me as I was breaking down my codependency was the realization that the relationship with my partner was almost completely mirroring my mother's and father's relationship. Freaky, scary, powerful. And I've read studies where it says that by age 7 or 8, we have picked up on relationship dynamics, and that becomes our norm. Then the dynamics between our parents, the conversations, the fights, the secrecy, the troubling, and even the jubilant and the happy times. The stories told us become our stories. And these could be actual fairy tales. These could be stories related to weight, which is what I'm acutely familiar with. Stories maybe that aren't necessarily verbalized, like emotional, physical, sexual, and spiritual abuse. A child victim of these painful circumstances begins to form a story of herself or himself, and oftentimes the story's theme is, I am worthless, I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, etc. And as time passes, we grow up believing those stories. We attract people into our lives that believe those stories too. We attract people into our lives that exacerbate these stories and whose soul worth and being rely on the continuation of these stories. And to repeat, that is the story of us being unworthy. Our inner voice is lost, hurt, unsure. And many times we know that something is wrong, but we feel so completely overwhelmed by the hole that we keep digging that we feel hopeless. And I've been there. I have felt all of these things. And I just want to say that you are not alone. You're not alone. And I sincerely think that my parents did the best that they could with what they knew and what they thought would build a better life for my siblings and I. And again, this is a cycle. I learned hard work. I learned sacrifice. I learned how to be a nice and kind and how to be a good person. But I did not quite learn about relationships, what healthy relationships look like. What healthy communication looked like and felt like, and what a healthy relationship with myself looked like. All of this led to toxic relationships with people, food, and myself that looked like binging and suicidal thoughts. And the first step was in realizing that these dysfunctional actions were only a reaction to a truly deep, dysfunctional relationship with myself, that I did those things because I hated myself. Shame and fear were so pervasive in my day-to-day thoughts, and it seemed as if I was spiraling out of control. Then the question was, why did I feel this way? And when someone feels pain or abuse as a child, whether it be moderate or severe, the part of the brain called the amygdala kicks in and takes over. And in my life, I guess I can say that I felt a lot of transference of pain from the dysfunctional relationship of my parents. My life was cloaked in secrecy in which communication was not encouraged and was not a top priority. Strong emotions, except maybe happiness and laughter, were discouraged. And the development of my personal identity was stunted. In my case, my identity was akin to achievement. So getting straight A's in school, playing well in sports, getting into the right college, getting on the homecoming court. But until recently, I wasn't able to address who I was at my core. And there were other more specific incidents of emotional, sexual, and spiritual trauma that I've begun to take inventory of. But throughout my childhood, all of these little jabs at my psyche really started to put my amygdala into high gear. And the amygdala is the first filter of the brain that is your prehistoric brain, or some call it your lizard brain. This is the part that wants you to run from a bear if you see it while hiking in the woods. So this is your fight or flight reaction. And bringing it back to my childhood, the amygdala was the primary communicator in my brain because I was feeling consistent pain and fear due to my environment. So biochemically, I was being conditioned to experience different things in my life as threats. And over time, this tended to distort my reality, distance myself from emotions, and form an identity that wasn't really me. And something interesting that I came across recently, and I'm encouraged by this movement, is something called ACE, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what's encouraging to me about this recognition is that now practitioners and experts are now realizing that these experiences are what needs to be treated in addition to or in conjunction with other ailments like addiction and suicide. And many times, those ailments are a way to mask and numb the mental struggles caused by ACEs. And here's an interesting fact. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, affect 34.8 million children across socioeconomic lines, putting them at higher risk for health, behavioral, and learning problems. And codependency is right in the thick of this. And I have to come to recognize my codependency by diving deep into my past. Not an easy, fun, or smooth ride, but in my case of healing, a definite necessity in my healing and my awakening. So when they say to quote unquote, put the past behind you, I would argue that it's not that simple. And if you're like me and you experienced some form of childhood trauma, I would say that doing that is fundamentally counterintuitive. And it's just not that easy. It isn't. And if you can't do it, you are not a bad person. You're not a failure. Trust me. If you're having a hard time thinking about this and not sure what you want to do or how to proceed next, and if I've struck a chord with you, but you kind of feel like you're at an impasse, I would say just first take a deep breath. And I would like to help you talk about it. And as you know, we can begin that conversation at epiphanyvault.com, or you can start that by just writing things out. Start with 100 words, like we talked about before. 100 words will do wonders when you do it consistently over time. Write a letter to your mom, or write a letter to your dad. And I will be reading mine on the podcast soon when I'm ready. But the first step is recognizing that it's not your fault. Like me, you do have a choice in how you form you. Your past does not define you. You are flesh and blood, and you are here and now. Much love to you, magnificent souls. Livin' and lovin'.